Welcome back to How to Pose. Today we have the Marvel Legends Retro Animated Series Spider-Man. The theme for today's video is So basically, this Spider-Man can pose extremely well. So I want to show you guys for every pose a couple other ways to achieve the same pose but just a little bit differently. But before all that, let's move on to the aesthetic segment. So for the aesthetics, there is a lot to unpack here. I'm going to try to go through it as quickly as I can, but there just is a lot to be said about this guy. So for starters, let's go over the good stuff. The proportions of this figure are really good. His shoulders are up higher than most Marvel Legends. Leg proportioning is a lot better than most Marvel Legends. Like the foot and the shin should be about the same length as the thigh here, and it looks to be pretty good there, so that's really nice. The body just looks really, really good. I really do like this Spider-Man body. For the sake of comparison, here is the Marvel Legends Renew Your Vows Spider-Man next to the Marvel Legends Retro Animated Series Spider-Man. As you can see, this Spider-Man is a lot more slender. He's a little bit smaller there, but overall, as far as the build, it's just going to be up to personal preference, which one you like better. Personally, I do still prefer the more muscular looking Spider-Man to the more slender, less defined Spider-Man, but I do like both of them quite a bit, and I will say that the proportions on this guy are actually better than the ones on this guy. So overall, this buck is a much nicer buck than this one. As you can see, this new Spider-Man has this nice bright blue. I know a lot of people really prefer that compared to the Renew Your Vows Spider-Man, which is a much deeper, darker blue. Personally, I do prefer this blue on this side, but I don't mind this blue at all. They both look really good. One of my favorite things about this figure, though, is the head sculpt. They just absolutely nailed the head sculpt and the likeness to the 90s animated series with this head sculpt. I think it is absolutely perfect. It is just the right size for this body. I think that the Renew Your Vows Spider-Man, his head, I feel, is just a little bit too big. But with this guy, we got it just right. And I grew up watching the 90s Spider-Man animated series, and yeah, it looks just like Spider-Man does in the show. The web lines are really clean on this Spider-Man here, so that's really nice to see. And overall, it's just another really nice looking Spider-Man. But now is when we get into the bad stuff. So first of all, this guy still has the problem of having paint imperfections scattered all throughout the figure. You can see on the shoulder right here, there's a little chunk of paint missing. On the arm right here, you can see a little speck of red where it should be blue. And just areas where there's just general sloppiness and missing paint, like right here on the lower back. So that's just really disappointing to see here on this guy, having some of the same problems that a lot of the previous releases have had as well. Aside from just general sloppiness and quality control issues, this retro animated Spider-Man, as clean as he looks, as nice as he is, in a lot of ways, he's super inaccurate to the 90s animated series. Yes, they absolutely nailed the head sculpt, but I know I was saying earlier that the bright blue is really nice. Well, it's also really not accurate. I'll throw up an image on the screen for you of what the blue really looks like in the TV show. There are some scenes in the show where the blue gets close to being this bright, but it's only really on certain parts of the costume, like the highlight areas, and there's not enough cell shading on the figure to really pull off the look of, you know, the brighter blues are just the highlights, because the brighter blues are the majority of the blue areas. So it just doesn't really look like it does in the show. It looks way too bright. So I guess technically the colors themselves are not technically inaccurate to certain frames of the show, but if they were going for when the blue looks more like this, there needs to be more of the darker blue to balance out the brighter blue to actually make it look like it does in the show. Also, if I'm not mistaken, in the show, Peter Parker was not a high school age. He was in college for most of the show, I believe, And against all the other superheroes, he was about just as tall as they were. So I don't understand here why he's on a buck that is really small in comparison to other Marvel Legends. You can see the Renew Your Vows Spider-Man is much taller. You know, and I've heard people justifying this by saying, oh, well, he was in high school. But no, I don't think he was for most of the show, was he? I was just rewatching the show before filming this video. In season 5, he's not in high school, but I can't remember back towards the beginning of the show whether he was, if he started in high school or not. But either way, he definitely shouldn't be this small, and he also should be much more beefy. He was much bigger and more muscular looking in the show, less defined than this, but still bigger in stature. Also, I noticed that there's no black line separating the red and the blue, which I was really curious about because I know that they've put the separation there before on other previous Marvel Legends. So I wondered if that was because that's how it looks in the show, but no, it's not. He does have the black line to separate the two colors in the show, so I don't understand why it's not here. I think it would make the paint job come off cleaner, and you'd be able to hide some of these little paint imperfections with a little black outline there. Yeah, so that's a little bit disappointing because that's not accurate to the show. Here's the back of the figure, by the way. I did want to show off that. I almost forgot. The spider logo there looks really nice. And then the other thing too is because there's not enough cell shading, it is inaccurate, but also moreover it looks really goofy in some areas. It virtually doesn't exist on the red besides down here on the red, if you could even see it, but it's so dark. I think they used a black instead of like actually like a red, like a dark deep red. It looks like you know, black with the opacity turned down is what that looks like, and it just looks really weird on that red there. But that's like the only place you'll find the cell shading on the red. And then on the blue, we get it on the legs here, but it just looks really weird because there's just like these weird streaks here, and I just don't think it looks very good on the legs. I don't think it looks very good at all because it's just pretty half-assed looking. Under the arms, right here, that looks good. I do like the little line here. I wish they did more of that because what they did do with these little black lines here look really nice. Under the arms, it just kind of looks goofy. So yeah, I feel that the cell shading here just leaves a lot to be desired. And then here on the wrist too is more of the cell shading on the red. If you can see it, it's not really showing up that well on camera, but it just looks really goofy. But despite all of the glaring problems this figure has with the aesthetic, personally, I still think it looks really, really good. So we're gonna start by getting this guy into a crouch. Now this guy, despite not having the toe articulation, like this Spider-Man right here, you can see the toes move on the Renew Your Vows Spider-Man, but not here on the retro Spider-Man. Despite not having that, this guy still gets into a better crouch than this Spider-Man right here, which is so frustrating. Hasbro, why can't we have the toe joints on this one? But anyway, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna start with the legs. We're gonna take the hip pieces, right? These little hip pieces right here, and we're just gonna rotate them all the way up so that the little hole here is covered up like that. And we're gonna do this on both sides. So it should look something kind of like this. Then at the thigh swivel on both sides, we're gonna rotate like this. Bend both of the knees all the way in. And be aware of how the knee is moving when you're doing this, because you can sort of play with the position and how the, you know, play with the silhouette that cuts, right? You can sort of fudge it into different positions, so just be aware of how that's moving when you're using it. And then we're just going to bring the feet to face forward, and so far we should be looking something kind of like this. Then we're gonna bring in the arms forward like this. The inside of the arm we're pushing towards into the chest like this. His hands should be able to touch each other like this. Then we're going to use the ab crunch to bring him down forward. Adjust the hands to line up with the feet, much like this. And then raise the head all the way up, just like that. And here we have Spider-Man in a crouching pose. And this guy looks amazing in a crouch. I love the fact that he can look up all the way. Oh my gosh, that's so nice. So simple, but so nice. And I think that because the proportions are better, he can just squat down a lot better too, and it looks more natural. And overall, he can just do this much better than the old Spider-Man. And I do want to show you the neck articulation here. So as you can see here, this is on a double ball peg right here, but the ball peg is too far in the neck, so you don't get a lot of movement out of it, which is why they cut out this notch here so you could get a little bit more, but it still doesn't even work that well. Whereas this one, you're not going to get as much tilt because it's not on the double ball peg like this one. Because this moves sideways, you were getting some tilt, but you are getting a lot more up and down here, which I would much rather have. So I really like that. But now if we take this, right, and we move this leg forwards and up a little bit, and this leg kind of down and back, kind of like that, then we can kind of turn his head to one side. And that's a really quick and simple way to make this pose just a bit more dynamic and give it a bit more of a sense of movement, like he's kind of inching forward, maybe prowling. And yeah, so that looks really good too. Another thing I really love to do is if you move the diaphragm to the side like this, bring his arm out a little bit more and down like this, and then straighten his head out, bring his other arm kind of up a little bit, bent inward, hand down, you might end up with something kind of like this. And I think this is a top tier crouching pose to get this Spider-Man into, and he just looks fantastic in it. I really do like this figure. It's really disappointing some of the shortcomings that this figure does have, because overall it's so good. And this figure would be such an easy recommendation if it wasn't a Walmart exclusive and you couldn't buy it anymore. I mean, for $30, this would be a slam dunk. I would recommend this to everyone. But unfortunately, many people, like myself, missed out on the pre-order for this guy. And yeah, I had to spend $75 on this guy via buying it from a scalper. No! But I digress. Let's move on to the next pose. Okay, so for this next pose, we are going to be web swinging. So we're gonna need a thwipping hand, and we're also gonna need a web accessory. It could be any web accessory. This one is from the Mezco Spider-Man 2099, but anything will do. So first, let's take the hand, put the web accessory on the hand, and then of course plug that into the figure, like so. The arm is gonna come forward like this. We're actually going to twist the torso kind of down like this and then bring the leg upwards. Move the foot out like that. The other leg is also going to come up, but it's going to then come inwards like this. Move the foot downward, and then the arm will come back a little bit, bend it slightly, hand outward. And then you should have something like this. Let's get him on the flight stand. And there's our Spider-Man web slinging pose, and that looks just absolutely fantastic. You can't really go wrong with the classic web slinging pose. Here it is from a higher up angle. I think that looks even better. Yeah, again, despite his problems, I really do like the look of this figure. Another way you could get this guy in a web slinging pose, you could move his legs inward like this, and that achieves a completely different look. This one looks really neat from this angle. I love how poseable this Spider-Man is. It just makes it so much fun to play with and take pictures. That in tandem with how good looking this figure is with its proportions and bright colors, this figure is just so much fun. Or you could go for a completely different look and have his legs more spread out like this, which is also completely valid. I wouldn't usually go for this look, but sometimes this one can be nice to spice things up. And here's the view from down below, just in case you wanted to see that. Now let's move on to the next pose. Okay, so for this last set of poses, what I want to do is show you a few different ways of how Spider-Man can avoid his enemies when they're attacking. We're gonna take our Hammerhead right here, who is in this nice swinging pose, like he's in the middle of combat with Spider-Man. And I'm gonna show you a few different poses where Spider-Man will be avoiding Hammerhead's attack here. So for the first one, what I wanna do is, I actually wanna have him standing on his hands. So I'm gonna bring his arms all the way down and move his hands outward like this, so he can kind of do a handstand. And even there, we can get him to stand. And then we're gonna move his ab crunch and his legs all the way forward, and his legs down and kind of like outward like this. Move the feet outward, and his head, you can kind of play around with the position of his head, but I kind of like it more forward like that. And just play around with it. If you play around with it for long enough, eventually you will get him to stand like so. And here he is posed up with Hammerhead, and I think that's so awesome. There's nothing cooler than seeing Spider-Man evade his enemies in or just a really acrobatic way. And this pose is also like kind of impressive too. A little bit of a show-off piece, like, oh, look what I got my figure to do. Like it's just really cool. A little bit of a flex here when you finally get him to stand up like this. But yeah, otherwise this is just really cool. I can see this looking really awesome on a display. Okay, so for this next pose, we're gonna need Spider-Man to have his web flipping hand and his web line. So what we're gonna do here is we're actually gonna have him kind of like leaping. So we're gonna move him all the way forward, kind of have his legs kind of bent like this a little bit, something like that. Doesn't have to be exactly like this, just, you know, something kind of loose to give the effect that he's in the motion of an action. In this case, the action being kind of flipping this way over, well, you know, you'll see. Then we kind of want the arm pointed down, head looking more like straight on towards where he's shooting, right? Then this arm, we're gonna move that back, twist the torso a little bit, and we should be looking something kind of like this. Now let's put him next to Hammerhead. And there it is, the second pose there for this final segment. He's kind of leaping over Hammerhead's bat there, and yeah, it just looks so amazing. Kind of looks like he's like swinging, maybe gripping onto the floor or whatever. I'm really happy with the way that this turned out. I think it just looks so dynamic. It is going to take a little while to get him posed up on the stand like this. I actually had to weight down the stand just to keep the pose intact. But once you've got this together, it looks really great. Here it is from like kind of a side angle, just in case you wanted to set it up, maybe put some motion blur on it when you take your picture and get like an in-action type of shot. This would be a great angle for that. And here it is from below, still looking really awesome. And yeah, this probably isn't going to be a display pose because you do have to weight down the stand. You might be able to find a different way to hold him up that'll be more display friendly, but this is just the way that I do it. But regardless, this pose looks incredible. Okay, so for this last pose, it's not going to be anything crazy, just going to be something really simple. It's not going to take me long to explain at all, but I promise it'll still be really cool once we get him next to Hammerhead. So literally all that we're going to do is we're going to take both legs, move them straight up, move the feet straight out, just like that. Move the torso in as much as possible, head looking forward, and then the arms straight back. And that is literally it to this pose. There's one more step, and that is going to be putting him on the flight stand. If you kind of like get the prongs kind of like in his butt cheeks a little bit, you can get him to kind of get it to clamp on right there, and then he'll stay on the stand. So, and here's our final pose of this last set here, and wow, it looks awesome. I've seen Spider-Man do this move plenty of times throughout various media, and it just looks spectacular on display here. Again, it can be a little bit tricky getting him balanced on the stand there, but once you do, it just looks incredible. And here it is from below right there. Still looking really cool. You kind of have to pick and choose your angles with this one to kind of hide the stand, because it is in kind of an awkward place. And there it is from like a top-down view. Still looking really cool. You can't see as much of Hammerhead from this angle, but if you're really just trying to focus on Spider-Man, It looks really cool. And you could get some more guys in here too and just make this really cool. You could really hide the stand by just throwing in some guys right in front of it. You know what? Actually, let me just do that real quick and show you guys. And there you go. Yeah, you could just add a few more guys to this, kind of just really hide that stand and just make it look so much more dynamic, like he's leaping over all of them, and that looks just so amazing. And here it is from down below. This looks really, really sick. I really want to take pictures of this now. And here it is from like more of this side right here to the right. This shot right here is actually really, really good because you can see that Spider-Man's leg is kind of like hiding the stand right there. So that looks really good. It looks like he's just floating there, like just jumping midair. It just looks so awesome right there. This might be my favorite pose I've done in any one of these videos so far. I really, really do like this one. Alright, so that's going to be all for this how to pose video on the Marvel Legends Retro Animated Series Spider-Man. I really, really do like this figure, although it does have a lot of problems still holding it back. I would really like to see a re-release of this, same head sculpt, but more accurate blues, less paint imperfections, and maybe throw in some gripping hands. That would have been really nice, especially since this is on the same body as the Amazing Fantasy Spider-Man, and that figure did get the gripping hands. Also, because this figure was a Walmart exclusive, I had to pay $75 for this. Now, granted, the original listing was $100 and I haggled them down to $75, but this figure is supposed to cost $25-$30, and for that price, I think it's a slam dunk. For that price, I think it's the best, most affordable Spider-Man figure that there is, period. But the problem is that you can't get it for $30, and for what it's going for on the secondary market, I don't think it's worth it. So I've had a lot of mixed emotions about this whole thing, about everything that Hasbro's been doing with their Spider-Man figures recently, and just how they keep missing the mark in just certain ways. And I wish that instead of putting some good things on one Spider-Man and some good things on another Spider-Man, why can't we just get one Spider-Man body that all the Spider-Man can go onto that has all of the good things? But anyway, I do like this Spider-Man more than the Renew Your Vows Spider-Man. It just poses a lot better, is a lot more fun, and the fact that it can actually look up all the way is a really nice thing. If you can find this guy for a good price, I would really recommend him. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a like. It really does help me out. And as always, stay tuned for the next one. I'll see ya.